Chuck Feeney was not built like a traditional titan of industry. Most men who chase billions are fueled by a deep desire for public validation and legacy. They want their names carved into the marble walls of grand institutions. Feeney operated on a completely different psychological wavelength. In the early 1960s, the blueprint for modern duty-free shopping did not exist. Air travel was transitioning from an elite luxury to a mass-market phenomenon. This structural shift created an entirely new class of global consumer. International travelers were suddenly trapped inside transit hubs for hours, with cash in their pockets. Chuck Feeney saw a massive logistical blind spot in these international borders. Along with his partner, he established duty-free shoppers to exploit this legal loophole. The concept was devastatingly simple but brutally effective. Sell premium, high-markup luxury goods directly to tourists before they board their flights. Perfume, top-shelf liquor, high-end cigarettes, sell them directly to international travelers completely tax-free. This meant they could undercut standard retail prices while maintaining astronomical profit margins. They did not just open a shop, they aggressively cornered the market by targeting military bases and airport terminals across Asia and America. Feeney spent months on airplanes, securing exclusive concessions from local port authorities. He out-negotiated massive retail cartels by offering airports a guaranteed cut of the raw cash flow. He understood the psychology of travelers trapped in purgatory between countries. These people wanted distraction, and they wanted a deal. By eliminating the local government customs duties, Feeney created a cash machine that operated outside standard domestic boundaries. His business model weaponized international maritime and aviation law to bypass traditional corporate taxes entirely. The company expanded ruthlessly from Hong Kong to Europe, capturing the spending power of a new global middle class that was beginning to travel by air for the first time in human history. Every major tourist demographic became a target for expansion. He analyzed travel patterns, anticipated hotel booms, and positioned his retail counters exactly where international capital was forced to congregate. The cash did not just flow into their corporate accounts, it detonated. Within years, retail outposts in airports across the globe were generating staggering margins. The enterprise transformed into an absolute juggernaut, quietly minting a fortune that swelled toward $8 billion. By standard capitalistic logic, Feeney had won the ultimate game. He had reached the absolute mountaintop of global wealth, holding enough liquidity to secure a permanent seat among the world's untouchable elite. He was richer than the old money dynasties of Europe. He possessed more liquid spending power than most major corporate conglomerates. He was operating at a scale where his personal network could dictate the economic trajectory of entire sovereign territories. His retail footprint controlled the primary commercial gateways of international commerce. He was single-handedly outpacing competitors who had been in the luxury distribution space for generations. The sheer volume of raw physical cash moving through his registers every single day required specialized accounting systems just to track the incoming wealth. But right at the peak of this monumental triumph, the story fractures. Chuck Feeney looked at the staggering mountain of wealth he had built, and he despised it. He did not feel a sense of accomplishment when looking at his bank balances. Instead, he felt an overwhelming weight of moral claustrophobia. The money was accumulating faster than it could ever be spent. He realized that hyperwealth isolates a man from reality. It creates a parasitic ecosystem of lawyers, advisors, and fake friends. He began to see his immense fortune as an anchor that would drag his humanity down into the mud. He saw the vanity of his contemporaries who hoarded resources just to watch numbers change on a ledger. For a true human operator, wealth is not an identity. It is merely raw leverage to alter reality. Feeney fundamentally rejected the typical corporate vanity cycle that traps the modern upper class. He did not want the mega yachts that require millions of dollars in annual maintenance. He did not want the high society press coverage that feeds the ego. In fact, he viewed massive personal hoards of wealth as a profound moral liability. He genuinely believed that excess wealth was a sign of systemic failure. So in 1984, he executed a high-stakes financial maneuver that completely blindsided his legal team. In absolute secrecy, he signed over his entire 38% controlling stake in duty-free shoppers. Every single cent of his billions was legally stripped away from his personal name. He transferred it all to a private philanthropic entity called Atlantic Philanthropies. He did not just donate a surplus of his quarterly earnings. He completely stripped himself of his own global empire. This was a total financial execution. His partners did not even know he had legally divested himself of his equity. He went from being a multi-billionaire on paper to a man who technically owned nothing overnight. The transition was absolute and irreversible. He had dismantled his personal ownership of a global commercial empire with a single stroke of a fountain pen. He deliberately chose to unplug himself from the capitalist hierarchy at the exact moment he achieved total dominance. And here's the kicker. He locked the entire transaction behind an ironclad non-disclosure mandate. He explicitly ordered his lawyers to ensure his name was completely erased from the public record. If a single journalist found out where the money was coming from, the funding would stop. This created immense legal friction because modern corporate laws are designed to track and celebrate massive movements of capital. The foundation had to route wire transfers through complex offshore entities just to keep the source anonymous. He forced his executive team to operate like an intelligence agency rather than a charity. Every grant was delivered with strict instructions that no plaque, no building, and no press release could ever mention the name Chuck Feeney. If a university tried to honor him, he threatened to pull their entire operational budget immediately. While his contemporary billionaires were busy plastering their surnames across glass skyscrapers, and university wings Feeney operated entirely in the shadows, he became a multi-billionaire ghostwriter for global survival. He was funding entire geopolitical transformations without anyone knowing his name. The contrast between Feeney's financial output and his daily reality was almost absurd. While his foundation was aggressively deploying hundreds of millions of dollars to build state-of-the-art cancer research facilities in Ireland and funding public healthcare infrastructure, in Vietnam the man himself lived like a low-level clerk. He wore a $15 plastic watch that barely kept time. He refused to own a car, opting to walk or take the subway. When he traveled the globe to inspect the projects he was bankrolling, he flew strictly coach, crammed into regular seats next to completely oblivious tourists. He did not own a luxury mansion with manicured lawns. Instead, he and his wife lived out of a modest rented 2-bedroom apartment in San Francisco. His entire luggage setup consisted of a couple of ordinary plastic grocery bags stuffed with documents. He had no desire to look wealthy because he had already transcended the need for external validation. He took pleasure in outsmarting the system by remaining invisible while deploying more capital than the average central bank. It was a total aggressive commitment to an internal code. For 40 straight years, he traveled the world in complete anonymity, dropping massive paradigm-shifting checks into underfunded schools and medical hubs entirely for the raw results. Never for the applause. He would arrive in war-torn regions or struggling communities unnoticed. He would evaluate the local infrastructure needs and authorize massive wire transfers from anonymous offshore holding accounts. Entire universities were built because a quiet man in a cheap watch sat in the back of the lecture hall and took notes. He funded the underground peace process in Northern Ireland, bankrolling structural dialogue when governments refused to talk to paramilitary groups. He quietly modernized the entire public health system of Vietnam by building clinics in rural provinces that had been devastated by decades of warfare. He poured billions into advanced medical research labs in Australia, completely upgrading their ability to fight infectious diseases on a global scale. He was systematically dismantling the systemic problems of humanity from a dark room with a pen and a pad of paper. He did not wait for governments to act. He targeted structural bottlenecks and dissolved them with massive infusions of anonymous cash. He funded public health campaigns that eradicated ancient tropical parasites from neglected populations. He constructed elite scientific research centers across 3 continents to ensure that future generations would have the intellectual infrastructure to solve major global crises. And through all of this, the public remained completely oblivious to his existence. He was a billionaire savior who vanished into his own data points. He structured his interventions to bypass corrupt government bureaucracies completely. If a project needed a specialized surgical wing, his team would buy the medical equipment directly from manufacturers and deliver it to the doctors in the dead of night without corporate branding. He operated with a level of cold efficiency that completely disrupted the slow-moving, self-serving charity industries of the modern world. By the time the curtain finally came down, the operation was complete. Chuck Feeney systematically forced his foundation to burn through its entire multi-billion-dollar endowment, intentionally setting a hard deadline to dissolve the entity. This was a radical departure from traditional philanthropy, which usually seeks to preserve capital so the foundation can exist forever. Feeney wanted every dollar deployed immediately where it could do the most active good. He fully achieved his radical lifelong objective, giving away 99% of his wealth while he was still alive. He held back a small insurance fund of $2 million just to survive his remaining years in that rented apartment. He watched his foundation close its doors forever, celebrating the fact that his bank accounts had successfully returned to baseline. He was entirely content with his status as an ordinary citizen who had played the ultimate game of capitalism, won it completely, and then walked away from the board without looking back. When he passed away, his personal bank account did not show a sprawling corporate estate or a multi-generational trust fund. It was near zero. He had successfully completed the ultimate arc, trading the hollow validation of a billionaire status symbol for total uncompromising impact. He conquered the absolute peak of global capitalism, only to give every single dollar back to the world from the deep shadows of anonymity. He showed the world that true power is not about how much capital you hoard. It is about how effectively you deploy it to reshape human history without ever leaving a footprint. He lived as a ghost, he fought as a titan, and he died completely broke. His legacy remains completely untainted by the corrupting influence of personal vanity. Long after the glass towers of his peers crumble into dust, the millions of lives he saved in the shadows will continue to alter the course of human history. He proved that the most powerful thing a billionaire can do is disappear completely. To fully understand the gravity of Feeney's strategy, one must look at how standard foundations operate. Most hyper-wealthy individuals park their capital inside tax shelters that only distribute 5% of their value annually. They do this to ensure the entity survives for generations, keeping the family name relevant in high society circles forever. Feeney saw this as a massive display of cowardice and vanity. He believed that a crisis happening today requires capital today. He argued that letting money sit in a bank account while people suffered from curable diseases was a form of criminal neglect. This core philosophy became known as giving while living. It was a radical doctrine that challenged the entire establishment of global wealth management. He forced other billionaires to look in the mirror and question why they were waiting until death to make an actual difference. His aggressive deployment style meant that billions of dollars were hitting frontline projects at maximum velocity. The ripple effects of his anonymous funding are still shifting the balance of global education today. In Ireland alone, Feeney poured over $1 billion into transforming the university system into a world-class research network. He did this at a time when the local economy was completely stagnant, completely reinventing the nation's intellectual capital without taking a single shred of credit. He would walk across the campuses he built completely unrecognized by the students, utilizing his cutting-edge laboratories. He took immense personal joy in that silence. For him, the sound of students learning was infinitely louder than the sound of applause. He repeated this exact blueprint in underfunded sectors across America and South Africa, systematically targeting the deep structural divides that keep families trapped in generational poverty. He built libraries, updated technology infrastructures, and funded full scholarships for kids who had been completely left out of the economic equation. In the arena of human health, his silent interventions acted as a global shield against suffering. When he noticed that rural communities in Vietnam were struggling with astronomical rates of preventable blindness, he did not launch a public relations campaign. He quietly financed the construction of hundreds of localized eye clinics and trained thousands of local health workers to perform advanced surgeries. He completely transformed the preventative healthcare architecture of an entire nation from a tiny desk in San Francisco. His foundation workers were strictly ordered to blend into the background, operating under the cover of ordinary nonprofit operations. This level of secrecy allowed him to avoid the political red tape that usually slows down major global aid programs. He was moving faster than international governments, dropping capital with surgical precision exactly where the human stakes were highest. He proved that a single man with a focused mission and a massive lever of capital could outperform global institutions when personal ego is completely removed from the calculation. As his life neared its final chapter, the financial execution reached its planned conclusion. In September of 2020, Chuck Feeney signed the final documents that officially dissolved Atlantic Philanthropies. The foundation had successfully deployed over $8 billion across the globe, leaving its bank accounts completely empty. He had spent decades ensuring that his empire would leave no financial residue behind. He did not leave a dynasty behind to fight over his assets. He did not leave a corporate monument to preserve his memory. He simply left a completely transformed world. He spent his final days resting in that modest rented apartment, completely at peace with his choices, knowing that every single dollar he made, from selling luxury goods to travelers, had been weaponized to defend human life. He completely inverted the entire concept of success in the modern age, showing that the true measure of a legendary life is not what you gather, but what you have the strength to give away. He conquered the system of wealth completely, only to become its ultimate master by leaving it all behind in the quietest way possible.